back to Long Automotive. Today we're doing another build breakdown video, and this one is on my 1984 Volkswagen Rabbit GTI. I've had this car about 6 years. It's finally, I would call, finished in my eyes, and honestly, it checks every single Mark I Volkswagen build box for me personally, meaning that this is really like my ideal GTI build. 16 valve swap, bike carbs, patina, Renault turbos, I mean, you name it. Like I can't get over how good this car looks, and it is awesome. And here's the GTI in question. Like I said in the intro, this is a 1984 Mark I Volkswagen Rabbit GTI. Now, in Europe, the Volkswagen Rabbit GTI was sold for many, many years. I believe starting in the 70s even. But in the US, we only got them for 2 years, being 1983 and 1984. And like I said, this is a 84. I don't know so much the differences between the 83, 84. Some of you guys can jump down in the comments. I think this red Volkswagen emblem might be one of the small differences between the 2 years, but really they are very, very close. And I think another one, if I remember correctly, this window stamping on the 83s is like a circle instead of that there. Another friend of mine said that he thought the 83s did not have the bumper fill here like this one here has, and I'm pretty confident all the 84s had that. Now, you'll remember from a previous video, my pickup truck over there, it does not have that bumper fill panel. So I know the 82s didn't have that, but I know the 84s do have it. Another thing, like I said on the intro, we got Renault turbo wheels here. These are reproductions, but you can still buy them new. Not reproductions in the sense that they're not from Renault, because they are completely factory Renault wheels, but they're not the original version of this wheel. They made them in the 80s and 90s. This is kind of a repop, kind of not, but the quality is fantastic, and I just absolutely love them. It's one of my favorite wheels on these cars. Now, a little bit of backstory about me and these cars. My dad actually worked at a Volkswagen dealer for about 15 or 20 years, and he bought my mama brand new a white Mark I GTI just like this. I believe hers was an 83, and they had it for several years before I was born. And then growing up, like I said, Dad worked at the dealer, so there were always old Beetles and Jettas and stuff like that around the house. And he actually dailied a pickup truck just like I have over there for a long time, many, many years. But never around the house did we have a GTI. So it was one of those things, like I'd see them around at shows and stuff, but I never had one myself. And I finally got the opportunity to have one, being a red one actually. That one was an 84. And at the time, I was just getting out of college, and I was working on my 242 turbo over there, and I just was not into it. So I sold that car to a buddy of mine. His name's Travis McBride. He runs a powder coating shop called McBride Custom Coatings. And if you watch the Helen video, that's actually the second Volkswagen GTI in that intro. The first one's this one, and then the red car in that intro was the first GTI that I had. Now, I never got that one running, but he's done a great job pulling it around. It's 8 valve, it's on some suspension, some OZ wheels. It's a really good car. Now, this one, I've had, like I said in the intro, for about 6 years. And I got it from a friend of mine that I went to high school with. Now, he had this car for many years as well, but never really got around to building it. It had the 16 valve engine swapped into it, the same engine that's in it today, but it just sat on the street in front of his mama's house for a long, long, long time. For whatever reason, he couldn't put things together and could never get it running. And when I got it, actually, it was in really, really rough shape. So I bought this car from him for, I believe, $300. And what did I get for that? Well, not a lot, I'll be honest with you. So it's a patina car, which I love, but anybody who's bought a car with a paint finish like this, you know that they are the absolute worst cars on the planet to buy. So what do I mean by that? Well, they always have no rubber because it's always been cooked out of it by the sun, which is what makes the paint look like this. They always have the worst interiors. Everything is just garbage except for the body. and sometimes that's garbage too. Now, this one is actually pretty reasonably rust free, apart from the little bit of surface rust on it. I did have to put a driver's floor pan in it, but that's about it. Now, the other thing is, when I got this car, it had not a single wire in it and not a single stitch of interior in it at all. And originally, this guy wanted a lot more money for it. I can't remember exactly what he wanted, but I think he wanted a couple grand for it. And I told him, now again, this was 6 years ago. I told him, I was like, look, man, it needs a lot of work. I just don't see it. So we kind of dropped it, and I didn't hear out of him again for another, I want to say another year or two. And I'd moved on. I'd continue working on my 240 and just kind of put Mark I Volkswagens out of my mind. Then, out of the blue, contacts me again. Hey man, this car's still sitting around. It's at my mom's house. She doesn't love it sitting in her driveway. Can we work something out? So we came to an agreement. $300. Hey, come get it. It's yours. Clean title. And that's what we did. That's what you see here today. And like I said, I absolutely love the paint finish on this thing. It's thin in a few areas, but I was able to buff it out really good. And anywhere that it's not straight primer, it cleans up really nice. The roof, like I said, has some surface rust on it. For whatever reason, the sunroof here, the sunroof kept paint on it. I don't really know. But down the sides of the car, it looks pretty good. And like I said, the hood's almost all primer at this point. But really, my philosophy to something like this is get it, buff what paint's left on it, and then just clean up like the bumpers and the grill and stuff. So this grill is just a factory GTI grill that I repainted, and then these bumpers are actually satin black powder coat, which is appropriate for this car because they came black, but I think it really ties the look of it together and cleans it up. Just like I said, the paint's not great, so you have to bring out small elements of the car to turn the whole look of it around. Now I talked up that 16 valve swap in the bike carbs. Let's take a look at it. Now there's a couple different 16 valve setups that you could have got. This one is out of a Scirocco, so I believe that's PL engine code, 1.8 liter. And as far as I know, there's nothing really done to the engine itself. It is very, very clean inside, so it's a rebuilt engine at least. And I've just got this little long tube header on it back here, a custom manifold, and these 2000 Yamaha R1 carburetors. Now, this manifold here, anybody looking to do this, did start as a kit from a company called Dan ST Engineering, but I had to modify it and put these flanges and the stock motorcycle boots on it. And if you'll look at the video that I put together prepping this thing for the trek to hell in Georgia, then you'll see what's involved, or what I did rather, in that, and as well as some of the work that went into rejetting them, because they just don't work out of the box. They run too lean. Now, all the things you'll notice in here is this massive aluminum radiator. This is what's called a Tuck Civic radiator. It's from Chase Bays. This radiator is made for track-focused Civics. Any guys that are familiar with Hondas will know that Civics come with this itty-bitty little radiator that sits on one side of the engine bay. Well, one thing that's kind of popular is you buy like an aftermarket bumper, and then this type of radiator sits in the very, very front of the car, and it's almost double the cooling area that you would have got in an original Civic radiator. Same idea with this. With the carburetors, it really narrows down the engine bay room that you have. So something like this sits way, way, way forward and really helps out getting more cooling area with the radiator, so you don't have any issues with this thing. It cools awesome, honestly. A few other details on the setup. Setup for non-AC with just the, I believe it's a 60 amp alternator. This is a Bosch one. It's the factory AC bracket that I kind of cut up to make it fit in there, but it works really, really, really nice. And then this is just a Earl's external oil cooler, which if you watch the previous video to this that I filmed, We're swapping that oil cooler because it failed previously. The previous one did, this one didn't. So another question I get with this swap is, what do you do about ignition? Well, this is actually a KR European 16 valve ignition box with the factory ignition module and a factory coil up there, as well as a factory distributor. And the reason I went with this ignition box over something like a factory Scirocco one, it's just simpler. The KR box doesn't require a knock sensor input or anything. You just set base timing, and it has a factory advance put in it. So it made it simple for me. And right now it's set up on stock timing with stock advance. So I think that's something like 30 degrees max. It's really pretty conservative, honestly. But it runs fine. I haven't had any issues out of that. I did think about in the past upgrading to what's called a 123 distributor. And the 123 distributor is an aftermarket deal that allows you to put a timing curve in the distributor itself, and it's Bluetooth, so you don't have to worry about anything. So another kind of neat detail about this car is you'll notice this transmission's 020, but it doesn't have the little plug on it for the reverse light switch that always goes bad. That's because this trans is I think a Mark III case with 16 valve Mark II gear set put in it. And then, of course, like the ARP bolts that go in the diff to strengthen it up, as well as, you can't see it because it's so dark, but it's got a weighted shifter on it and all that good stuff. Now moving inside, like I said, this thing came with not a single stitch of interior, so there's a couple of things that I don't have, the factory passenger seat being one of them, and another being a headliner. The headliner boards are really hard to find these days. But I do have a factory driver's seat in it, as well as a factory rear seat in the car, which is really, really nice to have because all of this Mark I GTI interior stuff's hard to find. So I also have the factory steering wheel. That's the only thing that came with it that said GTI on it. Factory cluster, really pretty decent dash I was able to get for this car. And this is just a OEM accessory radio. I think these could have been dealer installed, as well as a kind of mixed set of gauges, but they're not bad. Golf ball shifter, which you have to have in a GTI in my opinion. And you can't really see them again, but factory Rabbit red floor mats. Move around to the trunk. Notice from the engine bay shot there's no battery in the front. That's because it's back here in the trunk. There's just not enough room, so this is just a sealed Moroso box. The battery cable runs through the car, and I put it on this end with these nice little, one of these nice little bulkheads. Those are super, super nice. I recommend. I got that off of Amazon, actually. All right, get the car in the air. Well, what do we have? First thing you'll notice is this nice shiny oil pan. This is a baffled unit. It's kind of old school, but I don't know what company it is. When I got it, this thing, you can see the dents and stuff in it. This thing was super bashed in, and I had to take it apart and weld everything back up to make it function again because all the little baffles and stuff were broken inside. That's fixed. You'll also see crossbar. This is hands down one of the best mods you can do to a Mark I. Anybody that's put one on will agree. Even the little, they call it the K member that goes in here that like Scirocco's had. But I prefer these. This one's from Eurosport, which is one of the more common ones. S&P Tuning also sells one. H&R Cup Kit suspension is what we have up here. And it's a shock and spring package. Maybe on the back here you can probably see it better. Yeah, there's a little bit better view of the H&Rs. That's the number. They're fine. I mean, I wouldn't call it mind-blowing, but they're fine. And then you see a Borla muffler. This is a exhaust kit that Tectonic Tuning sells, and it sounds great. Honestly, I'm really surprised with how much volume the exhaust does have because you see it has this one muffler here and it has another one up there. Big rear sway bar on this thing, and just a itty-bitty little Carter fuel pump for the 3 psi fuel pressure that the carburetors require. Now you're probably sitting there asking yourself, hey Kyle, I thought carburetors were awful and starting was difficult and all this, and my cousin said this and that, and well, you know what? This is cold start on these carburetors from the fuel pump. Pull the choke, manual choke, dead cold. Can't ask for much better than that. Now it'll sit here in a high idle for a little bit. If you just kick the choke off, it'll still run, but it needs to warm up a little bit to maintain, you know, a constant engine speed. They are carburetors, after all. I put a wideband in here, so I kind of know when tuning what's what. Little digital voltage gauge up here, and like you saw earlier, just a clock, oil pressure, and oil temperature on the console. Warmed up to your liking? Like I said, carburetors, they still need to warm up a little bit, but it's pretty nice. I mean, got a rev right out of the box. Settles out about 1,000 RPM. Say we go for a drive. Let's see what we can do. Got it warmed up here. Much of the hey, thanks again for watching. Any questions you guys have, as always, you can jump down in the comments and ask me why I made certain decisions, or even constructive criticism. I'm fine with that too. And you know, we can have a friendly discussion about why I did certain things, or you want to get a little bit of help on your setup. I don't know everything, but maybe I can answer a question for you here or there, or maybe somebody else in the comments can answer. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, and you'll see more in the future. We got plenty more work coming, and more Volkswagen content, more Volvo content, hopefully some classic American stuff too. You never know. So anyways, thanks guys. See you in the next one.